I know. All right, welcome back. We're gonna get into the really fun stuff now. So Korean natural farming. Love this stuff. It's the peasant technology. It's really simple. And so when the farmers in Korea were faced with the question of, okay, our fields aren't as fertile as they used to be, they still had the good fortune of having some wild mountains around them where they knew there's still really healthy forests up there. And those forests used to be down here, but we cleared the land and we turned it to agriculture, and now our fields are decaying. Well, we know where the source is. The source is up in those mountains and those forests. And how can we get those healthy life forms, that healthy biology from up there in the forest back down into our fields? And so what they devised was a little system. You take a little basket, fill it up with some rice that you've cooked a bit hard. It's like al dente a little bit. And you take this guy and you go over and kind of bury it just like under the surface, like under a tree, like in a super fertile area like that. And if it's going to rain, you got to put a little tarp over it so it can't get directly rained on. And if you have critters can be awful because they love a nice meal of rice out in the forest. It's like breakfast in bed. So you got to protect that, but you're going to come back and you're going to gather this container and you're going to open it up. And oh my gosh, the amazing things you might find inside the container. It can go all sorts of different directions. It can turn all black and gross and you smell it and the smell test instantly tells you, nope, we're not doing that. It can turn rainbow colors because there's all these different bacterial populations in there, and that's pretty cool. That's a lot of biodiversity, which is what we're going for. But what we really want is when this thing, and I wish I had some illustrations for you, but there's ample online, is this like beautiful white, fuzzy, almost cotton candy mycelial mat growing on the surface of there. And that's when we say, okay, we got the stuff. So we have this collection. We call this an IMO collection, indigenous microorganisms. And then they figured out that sugar, we got it all wrong in the West. That sugar is like a food or something. In Asia, they understand food is a condiment maybe, but it's also like a really valuable chemical. Like sugar, you can do stuff with. It's really hygroscopic. It sucks the water out of things. So we're going to take this rice that's all fuzzy and beautiful. Oh, it just smells delicious. And we're going to mix it like 50-50 with sugar, with like brown sugar, just raw, unrefined kind of sugar. And what that's going to do is it's going to suck all the moisture out of everything in the rice. It's going to cause all these microbes to dry out. And when the microbes dry out, they know what to do. They go dormant. They're like, it's no stress. We're just going dormant. And you end up with this like rice in syrup is probably the best way to describe what it looks like. It's like rice in syrup. It's so sugary. It's like crystalline. It's totally preserved. And that is now we call this IMO2. It's the sugar rice. And this we can preserve. So we can make our collection and then we can preserve that sugar rice. And then here's where it gets fun. Now we're going to grow out these microbes because we had the perfect microbes in step 1. And step 2, we extracted them down into sugar and they're all dormant and ready to re-explode with life. And in step 3, we're going to bring them back to life. And to do that, we're going to give them a bunch of food to eat. We're going to get something like they love to use in Korea, rice bran, because it's cheap and it's available. It's a byproduct of the rice milling industry. But we can use really any kind of grain byproduct. We can use like wheat middlings is a popular thing to use. We could use like really low grade ground up corn. It's really a matter of using whatever's cheap and available. We're going to moisten it. We're going to get just the right amount of moisture in there to where when we squeeze it into a ball, we can make a little ball, and then if we flick it, it just crumbles back to nothing. If we squeeze it and let go and it just crumbles apart, it's what? Too dry. Too dry. If we squeeze it into a ball and then we flick it and it's still just a rock in our hand, it's too wet. So we get that nice, perfect texture thing, and then we take our rice sugar syrup and we dilute it down like a whole lot. Like, I don't know what the number would be, like 500 to 1 or something. And we spray it on this pile. And these microbes, They hit that moist medium and they come to life from the moisture. And as soon as they wake up, they're like, hey, I'm hungry. And they're surrounded by food and they just start growing. And so we take the billions of microbes that we had in this collection, and then we reduce it down into sugar syrup, and then we put it back into this food, and we multiply it back out again, and now we've got like hundreds of billions of microbes. It's incomprehensible, the amount of multiplication that happens inside this pile. So this pile, we manage it really carefully. This is like where the crossover with Elaine comes in. We got to make sure that moisture is just right. We got to make sure the temperature is just right. So we're monitoring it. We're turning the pile to keep the temperature just right over time. We want that temperature to be like 120, 125. That's like the sweet zone. We start getting hotter than that, and all sorts of weird thermophilic bacteria start to really overpopulate. If we're lower than that temperature, it's not really alive yet. My teachers say that the heat that you feel is the love. It's the love of the microbes self-replicating. When that pile is completed, we'll notice the temperature curve starts to decline and it naturally just starts cooling off. And we'll notice this beautiful whitish cast over the whole pile. And we're thinking, wow, we've got it. Now here's one of the geniuses of Master Cho in his teaching. He says, well, if we just take this pile and throw it on this garden soil and even maybe mix it into the garden soil, that's like a major like collision of two worlds, right? You've got like really different microbial realities in your garden soil and in this amazing pile of IMO that we've made. So we're going to help these microbes to understand the world that we're building them to thrive in. So we're going to take another step. We're going to go IMO 4. And in IMO 4, we're going to mix together our IMO 3, that like grain substance that's all inoculated, with the soil from our garden. 50-50. And it's like, it's a get to know your neighbors kind of social mixer event, where the microbes in the soil and the microbes in the IMO pile kind of do their dance, they fight, and they chat, and they empathize, and at the end of it, they're like, all right, we're cool, like we figured it out. And that's our IMO 4. And it also goes through that same temperature curve thing, and we got to be managing it and not letting it get over 125, because I mean, at this point, we've put a lot of love and time into this pile that is like our baby. You know, we're out there every morning and afternoon, like rushing home from work to check the temp. And if it gets too hot, it's like, oh, what did I do, you know? So it runs its little growth curve and cools back down again, and now it's ready to go onto the soil. Now, we still have that same problem of, oh, if we just throw it on the soil surface, so much of it is just going to oxidize off from the dryness of the air. But it's tempered a bit because we've got 50% soil in there already. So it's like, it's got a little bit of its own cushion in terms of maintaining in the face of that dry soil surface, or dry air on the soil surface. You know, we can dig it in a little bit. It's wonderful if we're like transplanting in crops to have a bucket of that with us and be mixing it in with us as we go right into our planting hole. So we still have that challenge of like, how are we best going to get this into the soil? But that IMO sequence produces amazing results. We can take that IMO stuff, we can throw it under the microscope too, Elaine Ingham style. Love to do that. You know, my Master Cho is just like mind blown to think that we're like taking microscopes and then looking at it and evaluating it on Western scientific terms, because to me, it seems like for those traditional cultural knowledges, they sometimes feel like a lot of reassurance from us as Westerners when we can say, hey, I learned about your system and I actually looked at it in the laboratory and it works amazing. How did you guys come up with this? They feel like a lot of pride in that because they feel like really seen and validated through the terms of our culture. So that's kind of cool to be able to have that dialogue there. And, oh, the other piece I forgot in this is the moisture that we're going to use in moistening the pile at the IMO 3 and IMO 4 stages, seawater. Not just regular water, because seawater, it contains all the minerals, and also salt in the traditional Asian conception of things. Salt is penetrating. My wife's a traditional Chinese doctor, and so she has taught me this from the medicine side, but salt is penetrating, and it allows these microbes and things to like penetrate into the earth. I wish I had a more thorough explanation of that.
In reality, though, how do you source seawater, or are you mixing salt with?
Yeah, we're making our own seawater. So 3.5%. 3.5%. Let's all do metric because it'll be so much friendlier. We'll take a liter, 1,000 grams, and we'll put 35 grams of sea salt into it. Maybe this is the beginning where we all get on the metric system. It'll help.
We've already got them using inches and feet for designs.
Where'd the decimeter go? So that's Master Cho and KNF. I'm going to take a little side detour to just speak briefly about syntropic agriculture. Ernst Gosch, German-sounding man who's actually Brazilian, and a woman, Helen Atwater, really love this system. And it's the idea that the most valuable thing for the health of the soil microbes is the exudates that are released by plant roots. That way more valuable than compost is the exudates that come out of plant roots. And that's the genius behind rotational grazing of cattle. When we come through and rip off the top of a grass plant, it releases plant exudates into the soil that are then super nourishing for the whole soil food web. So
that word?
Exudates. Things that exude. Yeah, exudates. So Ernst's style is down in Brazil. It's syntropic forestry. He uses a lot of plants that aren't applicable to us, but the concepts are really cool. It's like, hey, let's grow a row of bananas alongside our papaya trees. We're not going to let the bamboo or the bananas go to producing fruit. We're just going to grow them up and chop them down. And we're going to have the compost mulch on the soil surface, but more important, we're going to have all the root exudates that they're releasing as they're growing really vigorously, which are going to feed the fungi in the soil food web, which are then in turn going to feed our papaya trees. And it works really well. On a more temperate kind of system, Helen Atwater loves to use this in her gardens, where she'll have rows or beds, in her gardens. It'll be like every other bed. So it'll be a bed of cabbage, and it'll be a bed of white clover that's growing, and then another bed of cabbage. And the white clover is there to grow just so that its roots can do their thing, and she can come through and mow it periodically and cause it to release more root exudates, and those feed the soil food web and nourish the plants nearby. So Helen grows amazing market vegetables, minimal to no fertilizer in the traditional sense, just using the nearby growing plants. So we can incorporate that into our gardens in a more simple way through what I call nurse crops. So this is the idea of like, we're going to grow cilantro super thickly all along the sides of our green bean plants, just with the purpose that when the cilantro gets yay big and the green beans are yay big, we come through and we cut all the cilantro down. They release all those plant exudates. They also are providing living mulch and then dead mulch, and they're also tying up the soil so we don't have weed problems and whatnot, and our beans are going to grow better as a result of it. The idea of nurse crops in the garden is something that I take away from Helen and Ernst's approaches. That's it's a really actionable kind of thing. So I just wanted to make mention of that because that's like another direction that you all might resonate with. You might be thinking like, oh, that sounds really cool. Like, it makes sense in our environment here. Like, trees grow like crazy. Let's do it. Let's let the trees grow like crazy. And let's just be hacking them back constantly, cutting them back to the ground, letting their roots release the exudates. It's more complicated than that because the forest here is so good at like dominating the environment here to the exclusion of the things we want, but we can work with those things. And then kind of the last style that I want to talk about, and it's kind of the style that I've ended up at mostly in my farming, although I still use all of these styles in different ways, is Jadam. And Jadam is a clumsy Korean-based acronym that means like for the good of the people in the land or something like that. It is a system founded by Master Cho's son, Young-san, who watched his dad develop this system. Master Cho's famous in Korea, tours all around, has a huge, huge network of farms and farmers that work with him. And Young-san grew up being the skeptical teenager that he was, saying, Dad, this is too much work. Dad, I don't want to turn the IMO pile by hand like twice a day for 2 weeks. There's got to be a better way. Master Cho said, you're arrogant, you don't know what you're talking about, whatever, you'll figure it out. And Young-san said, no, I'm a scientist, I'm going to figure it out. And Young-san, his whole thing was like, how can we make Korean natural farming easier for people? Because if it's easier, people are going to like doing it. So instead of all this mess with the rice and the pile of rice bran and the temperatures on it, he says, look, take a bucket. Take 2 socks. Take some, go find where you're going to find, wherever you're going to go bury this container, just take a little bit of that leaf mold. And this is really good stuff. You see all the white there? There's actually a little mushroom primordia. You can grow it. I didn't see that, but I was so happy when I found it later. So this is the goods right here. You're going to fill a sock with it. Yeah, fill up a sock with a whole bunch of leaf litter. How much? I don't know. I don't care. It's not 223 grams. It's not, you know what I'm saying? It's like, just put some in there. Young-san's saying, when you take his classes, so easy. So easy. He says it over and over again. We need some starch. Microbes aren't fussy. They don't need like al dente pasta or like heirloom potatoes. This is old rice from last night. You can also just take a potato and throw it in the microwave. That's what I used to do when I had a microwave. Take an old, gross, partially bad potato, cut off the rotten part, throw it in the microwave. So we got food, we got life. We put them together. We tie them together here. I'd have a stick across here, and we hang them in the bucket. We fill this with water. We're going to use seawater, just like we talked about before. And we just let that hang out. It's really cool. How do we know when it's ready? This is the part that actually is really technical. Little bubbles are going to start rising. Little bubbles start rising. And eventually they're going to start rising so basically they form a little disc of like foam. And when that disc has a perfectly clear moat around the outside edge, but looks just like a perfect like floating pizza in the middle there, it's perfect. It's ready to go. And we can verify this with the microscope. And it's so fun to be able to do that because Young sounds like, I don't know, microscope if you want. But I find it entertaining, and it's helpful for teaching people too, because seeing is believing when they can see it under the scope. If we let this thing go another 12 hours, what's going to happen is our beautiful foamy disc is going to collapse, and there's just going to be foam on the whole surface. And that means we pass the peak, the microbes are starting to die back because they don't have enough food anymore. So when it's at that perfect disc stage, we take this, we dilute it with more water. We can go anywhere from like as low as 10 to 1 to as high as 500 to 1. And then we can just drench this on the soil. You say, Young-san, how do we apply it to the soil? He says, just put it on the soil. Say like, where and how? He says, look, just try and get it as deep as you can. The Korean word I think for deep is like ja or something like that. So he's always like ja, 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 you know, as if we all really get it when he says it in Korean. And so it's great to do like right before a rain. How do we apply it? I mean, we can apply it with a sprayer. We could apply it with a tractor sprayer. There's all the issues of destroying the microbes through the spray orifice pressures. But we also sometimes just take a bucket and gently, like I tell my kids, look, it's not a waterfall. It's gentle. Because we don't want to impact the soil. And then it rains and water just flushes it down in. And that's how we create topsoil, is that mechanism of flushing the microbes from the surface down deeper. So the first time when they hit that, the microbes hit that subsoil strata level, right? So here's our topsoil, and it's coming down through here, and it hits, and this is subsoil. It maybe penetrates like this far into it, and that's all it can handle. But now our horizon's here. And the next time maybe it can just poke in just a little bit. And that's how we can increase topsoil. You're not building up topsoil. I mean, you can, but like really, we're deepening topsoil by shifting the microbe condition right there at that subsoil topsoil horizon level. And what we're doing is we're just blasting this subsoil with like so much microbes in this bucket, and it's billions and billions of microbes, that they can really start to like chip away at that subsoil and kind of get some traction there. I love this technique. It works. It works. That's why I love it. I've made complicated compost and used it, but when I water in my transplants with this, it's called JMS, Jadam Microbial Solution, those plants, it's as if they didn't just get transplanted. It's like you put them there and they're just instantly like, I'm here. This is my place. And there's a continuity between the microbes that their soil roots have and the microbes immediately surrounding them. And so they can just like kind of flow into life like that. One of Young-san's probably biggest gifts, he would tell you his biggest gift, is that he figured out pesticides in a natural way. Because, you know, we've all observed, yes, healthy plants have less disease and pests, but healthy plants also can be pretty darn tasty. And bugs love tasty stuff too. And so the idea that like, oh, we're going to just have such good compost that the soil's going to be so healthy that bugs are never going to bother us is magical thinking. When you get a big, luscious crop of something, bugs are going to come and bother you. And Young-san was really distressed about the pesticide use in Korea, and he developed a system of making natural pesticides that are really simple and effective. And so the one that we use most often, we make from the leaf of the ginkgo tree, really abundant tree that grows around here, non-native to anywhere, the coolest tree in the world. I mean, look at this leaf. No other tree looks like this. This is a tree from the dinosaur age that's been kept alive in monasteries in China. There's none extant in the wild. I'm not aware of like record of any in the wild for like thousands of years. Super fascinating. Better than the leaf is the fruit. Does anybody familiar with ginkgo fruit? You know it or you don't. Yeah, it's like, have you ever had food poisoning? Like, I'm not sure. Have you ever smelled a ginkgo fruit? I don't know. Yeah, you haven't. Ginkgo fruits are gnarly smelly. They make a great pesticide. So what we do is we take a whole bunch of ginkgo leaves. How much? Just a whole bunch. If this was my pressure cooker, I'm just going to loosely fill it with ginkgo leaves. We're going to use a pressure cooker for this. We're going to then fill it with water, just straight water, not seawater. And we're going to pressure cook this for like 3 hours. And what's really cool is this leaf, you would think it's going to make like a dark green kind of brew, right? That would make sense. It comes out, this one's a little bit sedimenty, but it comes out like brilliant dragon's blood red after you make this tea in the pressure cooker, which I'm always a fan of, like fun little mysterious alchemies. Our basic pesticide is this ginkgo herbal solution. A natural soap that we make. The soap that we make is made from just any oil. We tend to use canola oil because it's cheap and readily available. You don't need to use like your finest olive oil for this. So we use canola oil and lye. Okay, lye is a gnarly chemical. It'll burn you. But on a chemistry level, it's NaOH. Sodium, oxygen, hydrogen. There's nothing weird going on here. And this stuff breaks down really rapidly in the natural environment, and it releases back to sodium, oxygen, hydrogen. There's no toxicity residue to it at all. That preparation is called Jadam Wetting Agent, or JWA. And it's oil and lye. It takes 3 days to make. And it gets us this wonderful soap that my family uses for all our soap. We don't buy soap for anything. This is what we bathe with, do our dishes with. We used to do our laundry with it even. So it's wonderful. We make probably 10 gallons a year of this stuff. It probably costs us $6 to do that. And maybe that's Those numbers aren't right. We make a lot of it. It's really cheap. How about that? And so we mix that together with the jadam, or with the herbal solution. My basic recipe, and you can shift this around, but for a 2-gallon batch of spray, I'm using like 10 ounces of my herbal solution, 5 ounces of my soap, and then a ½ ounce of this stuff, which is jadam sulfur. And actually, of everything Young Son's created, he says this is the thing he's most proud of. He's most proud of is jadam sulfur. He figured out that if you take powdered sulfur, just pure elemental sulfur, capital S, 99% pure, you can buy it in a yellow powder on Amazon, and you use the heat from the reaction of putting lye into water, because when you put lye in water, it gets crazy hot, that you can use the heat from the lye reaction with the sulfur to melt the sulfur into a liquid form. And so this is our jadam sulfur. Use a very small amount of it, ½ an ounce for a 2-gallon batch. So that's a ¼ ounce. It smells really strong. It smells like Yellowstone. It smells like a hot spring or something. And it's sulfur. And why sulfur? The sulfur is super effective at taking out your pathogens, your wilts, your rots, your blights, all of these kinds of mystery things that as growers we're like, organic growing, late potato blight, we're just screwed, you know. This is a tool that Young Son has found is extremely effective across a huge range. It's really effective with powdery mildew and downy mildew. In essence, the combination of the ginkgo solution, which is super deterrent to any kind of insects, and the sulfur solution, which is super deterring to like small pathogens, bacteria, things like that. The soap acts as the binding agent and this dispersing agent that allows it. It's a surfactant, which means that it spreads itself in a super thin layer along the surface. So when we spray this onto our crops, which I spray this as often as twice a week in the peak of the summer here. I use a backpack sprayer, real simple thing, and I walk around and I look like the pesticide guy. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, and here I have some insecurities around this, and I pull people aside. I'm like, hey, I just want you to know, you maybe saw me out there with the backpack sprayer, and like, I make these things from home. If you're like, we weren't worried out. I'm like, we didn't. So, yeah, as much as twice a week, I'm spraying that on there, getting that super thin coating. It's really frustrating living in a rainforest and spraying soap-based surfactants because they just get washed off all the time. But I'm really happy to report that I sprayed it most recently right after that last rain, and it's still like sitting on the leaves of my plants right now. And these are my little joys in life.
Could you either write or repeat slowly that recipe?
Which one?
The recipe for.
Oh yeah.
2 ounce.
Yeah, I'll write it up in just a second, Larry. So this pesticide thing is a game changer. We can protect our plants. We don't have to use Rime, right? Floating row covers, because we're like, oh, I don't really like the Rime. It's kind of gross. It gets in the soil, but how else can I protect against the cabbage moths in the early summer or whatever? We've got this tool that we can use. We don't have to fall back on BT. A lot of y'all probably know about BT. Hey, BT works, but it kills everything. Like, there's the idea that like BT is okay for beneficials. It's not. It kills absolutely every kind of soft-bodied insect. And so I don't feel great about that. This is a deterrent. This doesn't kill things, but when they come up and take a bite of it, they're like, nope, and they go somewhere else. So it serves our needs. So this is a really valuable gift that Young Son gave us. And then the last thing that Young Son taught us is in terms of making fertilizer. Like not like what till now we've talked a lot about soil health, soil food web, how to deepen the topsoil layer, those kinds of things. But what about when we just got a crop growing? The corn's in the ground, it's this tall, we can see the leaves are getting a little thin, and we're like, we need to pump this up with some fertilizer. Super simple technique, as again, that Young Son taught us, and this is a technique that I've come across all around the world. It's not, I don't think it's unique to him. You take a bucket, fill it with some stuff. It could be grass clippings. It could be weeds that you just pulled from the garden. That's a great one. You know, you've been out weeding and just, if you don't have livestock to feed it to, just fill a barrel with it or whatever. Or if you want like full-on high-octane stuff, use some slaughter wastes. That's what I do. All the fertility for my garden this summer came from butchering a sheep this spring. We took all the guts from the sheep, put it in a 55-gallon barrel, gave a nice big handful of microbes to it, threw that in there, filled it with water, put the lid on it, and said, have fun, microbes. And they went crazy. And they ate all that sheep gut, and they broke it down. And we go in there now, and my youngest son is really generous. He does this for our family. It's his contribution. And he buckets off this it's so bad smelling. I mean, it's bad. And we can dilute that down like 100 to 1, and then we can soil drench our plants with it. And it is amazing. It's just high octane plant fuel, and the ability to do it so cheaply. Fertilizer is so expensive if you're buying like liquid fish emulsions or things like that, and there's all sorts of questions. I have deep questions about what kinds of toxins are being shunted by the industry into fertilizer products as a way of them disposing of them, and we are spreading them on our lands unknowingly. So it's awesome to be able to take all the slaughter waste that normally we just dig a hole and bury them, and to be able to utilize them in that way. I have one more thing I want to share with you, just because I noticed I brought it. Biodynamics. A simple thing we can use in biodynamics is this stuff. It's called Pfeiffer Field Spray. Aaron Fried Pfeiffer was a German man who came to America in the early 1900s to share the knowledge of biodynamics. He got here and he noticed two things. One, American farmers kick ass. They are so much better farmers than the farmers back in Germany. It's going to be hard to get them to listen. And two, these American farmers have such fertile soil that they don't listen. They don't need my advice. They're doing so well on their own. So Pfeiffer was like, there's no way that I'm going to convince these American farmers to like make the cow pile and the chamomile and the stag bladder. So he was like, I'll do all that for you. I'll make this product through the power of drying out microbes. They go dormant, they sporulate, so they're ready to reproduce for the next generation as soon as water hits them. That's what this stuff is. So as soon as water hits this, it comes to life. You moisten it the night before, kind of foams up a little bit overnight. Then you dilute it down a whole bunch, and you spread it on your fields, you spread it on your compost piles. But this contains all the microbial magic of the whole Steiner biodynamic compost in a really easy to use form. So it's called Pfeiffer, P-F-E-I-F-E-R, Field Spray, and I really like this. That's everything I was hoping to avalanche onto y'all this morning. I have some books that I recommend. I'd recommend you just take a picture maybe of the books and go look them up and buy them. And if you have questions, I like to talk about books too. And I think we've got 6 minutes, and I'd be really happy to answer questions from any of y'all.
How long does that fertilizer spray last?
Ah, great question. So the sheep guts in the barrel,
Yeah.
Forever.
Forever.
Yeah, Youngson says, you know what? If you used only half of it, you could just like throw a few chicken carcasses in there, some more water, and just keep on going.
Cool.
Don't look back.
Cool.
Yeah.
But you call that spray, but I heard you say on the soil with that. Like I wouldn't put that in foliage.
You can foliar it also. Yeah.
Kind of roads in there.
Yeah, you can foliar that. I tend to soil drench it.
Yeah.
I have other tools that I like better for foliar. Master Cho has a whole set of these foliar sprays that we use that are amazing and beautiful. I didn't even want to touch it because I didn't want to just not give it the respect that it's due. But you know, this is the kind of stuff that like I could totally teach like a weekend class on KNF, and we could learn to make all these different preps. And if that's something that any of you are interested in, just reach out. I'm happy to teach those kinds of courses on a demand basis.
Do you bury the buckets, or is it just you put it somewhere out in the sunlight? Like, is there any kind of storage?
For making the fertilizer?
Yeah.
So he says put it right where you're going to apply it, because the conditions are the same and it's less work. So I've literally just got a barrel sitting right above the garden. Yeah. It doesn't smell. It's got a really tightly fitting lid on it. That was one of my like design requirements, because I'm, this is communal. I'm in a different neighborhood. I've got to make sure everybody's real happy with what I'm doing. So I was like, it's not going to smell, and it doesn't. So.
What if you don't have access to slaughter?
If you don't have access to slaughter waste, You can use your kitchen scraps. You can go to the supermarket and ask their butcher if he has some scraps he'd save for you.
Roadkill.
Roadkill's a totally good
Yeah,
option.
real.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is it the intestinal bacteria and stuff that you're trying to get out of it, or just, I mean, meat scraps, general bones,
Yeah.
just anything?
Yeah, blood, meat,
Okay.
high nitrogen stuff. Yeah.
In that ginkgo pesticide you're making,
Yeah.
what is being extracted from the ginkgo that is activating with the soil?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just that observation has shown us that like no insects ever eat ginkgo leaves.
Okay.
So it must have some compound. We use other plants as well. In California, I didn't have ginkgo, so I used oleander. There's lots of different plants that we can use for that. And we can use our own senses of like, whoa, all these plants in this area are really bug damaged, and this one is immaculate. Well, let's go make pesticide.
And the soap is just being used as a surfactant. That's the only purpose for it being there.
I would hesitate to say that's the only purpose because I think there's like a genius to it all that, in the whole that I don't necessarily even understand. Yeah. Huh?
Probably not enough time, but can you speak to like how you apply some of these techniques to very depleted soil or areas with no topsoil, but sort of first steps to?
Great question. The best thing to do this. So, I wrote the name Chris Trump up here. Chris Trump. Unfortunately, last name, really wonderful man. You'll forgive him as soon as you meet him. I promise. Chris comes from Hawaii. His family runs a 400-acre commercial macadamia nut orchard entirely on Korean natural farming. He has great YouTube videos. For any KNF videos, just search Chris Trump, KNF, and then like whatever the things you want, like JMS, the Jadon microbe solution. That's the best video you'll find on it. Where was I going with this? Chris Trump.
Oh, the responding to the question about fresh.
Yes, thank you.
Depleted areas and topsoil.
Yeah, so they're like building soil out of lava rock on the big island of Hawaii. And what they do is they take corn seed. The corn seed has so much nutrients in it already that you can just broadcast that onto super, super poor soil and it'll grow. And as far as it grows, you let it do that. And he said, the first year, you'll get corn that'll grow that much on the lava. And you just cut it down, leave it in place, pour the microbes over the soil, repeat. And it's Hawaii, so you can do it like 4 times a year. Grow it, cut it, grow it, cut it. And that's the technique. They've also done that in Africa in super, super devastated, bad soil areas.
So if you've got like some very like depletion tolerant invasives covering everything, or like my friend is miscanthus all over a former mine site, for example, would you just be siding that and like?
Yep.
And
Siding that and applying the microbes. Siding that, applying. Once you get to the place where you could get some corn to germinate, and you can even like pre-soak the corn and like, so it's like really easy for it to just take off. And you just keep going. And the magic of that Jadon microbe solution is tremendous. Yeah. Huh?
With the bucket, you've got the meat bits and all that jazz. Is taking off, and I just wasn't sure if I missed this. Taking off from the top is necessary, or can you like say put a valve at the bottom for easier use?
Yeah, you can take it off whatever's easiest for you. A valve at the bottom is probably going to get clogged up. You could build like a cage around it or something so that could still flow. I've done
It's
that.
like, is the surface, the things that are more on the surface, is that the important stuff? Like,
No.
Okay.
It's just the effluent. Just that liquid's what you want. However you can get it out of there.
I think we have to get the kids a little more involved.
We have found at this moment just a simple bucket and just real careful on the surface. That's what's working best for us.
Okay.
Sometimes I've stuck a hose with a Maisie fertilizer injector, if you're familiar with those, down in there. And the suction of the line pressure pulls up a certain ratio and it mixes in. That's really cool.
So you said you could just kind of keep it going by adding like new organic material. Is it sort of like a sourdough starter in that way? You just need to keep adding stuff so it has food to eat and continue?
Yeah, or if it runs out of food, then later on just add more microbes and more food and it'll just keep on going. Yeah, so easy. So easy. Yeah, Larry.
Recipe.
Oh, recipe, yeah.
2 ounces of something.
Yeah, so the basic pesticide per 2-gallon batch, 5 ounces JWA, wetting agent, 10 ounces JHS, Jadon herbal solution, and 1/2 ounce JS, Jadon sulfur. Yeah. So
Is the jam sulfur just a solution of sulfur powder and water? What is the jam sulfur?
no, it's the one that you make with it's lye and water to get that heat, and then the sulfur powder gets melted from the heat. So it's lye, water, and powdered sulfur.
Cool. 50-50 lye to sulfur? Or does
No,
it-
you'll have to look up the recipe. It's extremely precise. Yeah.
The book is worth getting. The
Jadam.
Yeah.
Yeah, this book is really good. The Jadam book. This book's really interesting, but it's kind of vulgar. Like, I can't believe I'm saying that about a Korean natural farming book, but these guys are like a little pissed about some things politically within the KNF movement, and they wrote this book, and so there's a few things where you're like, ooh, that's a little off color, but and it's so funny because Ray Yoon, the guy that wrote it, is like a martial arts master and like a total it's surprising some of the stuff that was written here, but it's a really good book. This book is really great. Farmers of 40 Centuries. This guy went to China in like 1910 and saw organic farming before it was organic and wrote about it. I don't think he realized at the time what a absolute gift to the future this book would become. I mean, because this doesn't exist in China anymore. I like my books. Anybody else?
I just wanted to get your thoughts on tilling. So you said there was no really good or bad side to that, and it maybe could be used for it, but then later on it sounded like maybe you wouldn't do it because of the loss of organic matter and carbon.
Yeah.
So I'm curious if you have any other thoughts on that.
Yeah, thanks for pointing out that kind of confusion. Tillage is highly consequential. And if you're prepared to accept the consequences of it, that you're going to lose half your organic matter, and you're going to have bare soil that's exposed to erosion, and if you're willing to accept those consequences and you have strategies to mitigate them, such as, okay, we're going to till this. It's all I tilled an area over at Amani Farm that had excess organic matter. There's roots everywhere. There's so much organic matter in the soil that there's not enough nitrogen for the soil to break it down, and it's building up and becoming woody in the soil, which is not helpful for a vegetable garden. So I was like, okay, I accept the consequences, but how did I mitigate? As soon as I tilled, I instantly had rye grain down so that the roots could fill in the pore spaces and we wouldn't get that compaction to occur. The rye grain also replacing some of that carbon, but I'm okay with losing some. But when you have your classic hard pan dead soil situation, I would go with the JMS and corn approach over the rototillet and add compost approach in your classic hard pan kind of setting. It'll be slower, it'll be more thorough, and you'll really get where you wanted to go. Anybody else? We're 2 minutes over. We're 4 minutes over, y'all. So yeah. All right. Enjoy. Yeah.